Thank you for having me. Um, it's a privilege being here. I've got three boys, Samuel, Jaden, and Daniel, as you've just heard. Samuel is 12, so I can identify with a lot of you in the space that you're in. So when I was asked to speak, I thought like, okay, I feel you. I feel these parents. And then Jaden is 10, and Daniel is almost 9. And I think we can learn together here. I want to share with you some nuggets that will stimulate thought. But I think that parenting is a lifelong learning journey because our children are always just getting older and older, going into different phases. So I want to share with you some thoughts today. Thank you so much for having me here. My kids are at South Downs, and I know that's part of the whole Advitech family, etc. So from time to time, I speak at various Advitech schools. So we're going to talk about parenting in the 21st century. That's the title that I've been given. I'm going to speak fast, so I'm hoping you can listen fast. Is that okay? All right. Is my voice okay for you? All right. One of the challenges I often have is if I'm on the phone, for example, with service providers, they say, I think this is a mistake. You know, we didn't want to speak to Mrs. Nyamuda. We wanted to speak to Mr. Right? I was at Hi-Fi Corporation returning something a couple of years ago, and the guy was staring at me, and I said, you know, I was wondering, like, why is this big dude just staring at me like this? At a certain point, he says to me, dude, you sound like Michael Jackson. You know? And I said to him, is that a compliment? And he said, of course, the guy was a legend. Then about 3 years ago, when my wife and I, when we were 40, when we turned, so I've revealed my age, I'm 43. But when we were 40, we went to Italy and other places. And I was at the airport there, and there's this Italian lady at the airport, and she's like, wow, you sound like Michael Jackson. And then I said, oh, I hope I can also sing like him. And I think something was lost in the translation. You can sing like him? You can sing like him? The worst was when a guy, I think we were moving houses or something, and I'd been talking to him for a long time, and I thought he knew who I was. And at the end of the conversation, he says to me, anything for you, madame. So I'm always encouraged when my wife tells me that my voice is very soothing. It's a nice, soothing voice. It should be used in those relaxation sort of, tapes. All right, so we're talking about parenting in the 21st century. All right? Let's talk about the tween years. I think you know the tween years. It's from about 9 through to 12, the tween years. And these are very interesting because kids between 12 and right through to 18 can experience the most difficult times. I'm going to be recording this, by the way. Have I started recording? I think I have. They experience difficult times, tough times, because of all the changes. And some of these changes are, one moment they can be very sweet, next moment they can be very moody. They experience challenges like peer pressure, identity issues, dealing with the opposite sex. When you've got friends around you saying, ooh, he likes this person, she likes that person. I'm sure you're going through it right now, okay? Lots of homework. How many of you are experiencing that, okay? Lots of homework. My wife and I often get to a place where we just like, if the kids are at home and they're playing outside, the three boys, we're like, isn't that a nice sound? Just hearing them laughing, kicking the ball, just being kids, okay? Not doing anything extracurricular, not doing sport, not doing homework, all right? And when kids are 12, it's very common to find that their interests could suddenly change. They can suddenly change. So this child who was big into soccer now is just interested in tiddlywinks or something, or table tennis. And you're like, what's happening to my child? And we've got this thing where we almost like want to force them to keep doing what we thought they're brilliant at. Partly because of our own identity as parents, right? Because we were rewarded for that. It worked for us because everyone was saying, wow, your son is such a good swimmer. Isn't this amazing? Right? And we're dealing with it right now. Because my wife is a triathlete, right? She was at world champs recently and all of that. And she comes from a very strong swimming background. People are wondering, what type of wife is this? She comes from a very strong swimming background, okay? Where you have to do, your 1.9 Ks, your 3 Ks, and so on in the water, right? But what's interesting is, although my kids are strong swimmers, they don't like swimming as much. So now my 12-year-old was complaining the other day and was saying, Mom, just because you're into swimming, now we have to swim and so on. We're saying, Samuel, you've got Achilles tendonitis right now, and you've been doing lots of soccer, and you've just had athletics season. Swimming is actually good for you. And you made the team, so your commitment should continue up until the end of the year. You can't say, my goal is to make the swimming team, but I'm not willing to go for training early in the morning, right? So that was the principle that was kicking in. But He's like, but why should I keep doing something that I hate? I was like, okay, you decide what you want to do next year, but follow through on your commitment. Are you feeling me, parents, on some of this? Okay. So during this time, you're 11-year-olds, and I hope this encourages you actually, because your 11-year-olds, they develop better decision-making skills during this time, all right? And it's funny because around this time, you're sort of wondering, can they make their own choices, or do I have to choose for them based on my experiences, right? But we've found that as a child grows older, the more they can be making their own choices for specific things, they tend to take ownership, don't they? Because you tend to support that which you create. Even in the workplace, some of you are leading teams and organizations. I coach lots of executives, and that's a big thing. Paul, how do I get my team to take ownership? Yeah? And it's the same with children. They learn those things when they're still kids growing up. Have you noticed what happens with lastborns? There are two major types of lastborns. There's a lastborn that was babied, so everyone did everything for them. And now as adults, they're always waiting for some strong personality to take over and strengthen them. They get into business partnerships that they didn't need to get into. They could have done it by themselves, right? But they need someone to always support them. They're not decisive. Then there's the other lastborn who was also babied by the older brothers, parents, etc., okay, spoiled to some extent. And based on that, they live their lives trying to be self-sufficient, trying to be independent. And they go the other extreme, okay? Someone is smiling at me. Maybe you one of those, eh? It's like, I don't need anyone. I don't need anyone. I can do it on my own, all right? But in an unhealthy way. Because remember, the sign of immaturity is dependence, where you're dependent on everyone for everything, right? And you can't do anything on your own, right? But then when you get from dependence, the next stage is independence. Independence isn't actually a sign of maturity. It's not a sign of maturity. When you've got that teenager who's like, Mom, I'm 18, I can do it on my own. That's not a sign of maturity. The next stage in terms of true maturity is actually interdependence. Interdependence. I need you and you need me, right? So I'm speaking to you now, but if I go and I greet you afterwards, what happens? I'll be asking you about what you're doing and I'll be learning from you. Does that make sense? All right. At this stage, they also begin to question authority figures, don't they? They begin to question authority figures. Have you noticed that? It's like, I'm not going to listen to you just because you're an older person or just because you're a parent. You have to be authentic. You have to be sincere. And it's interesting because children understand what sincerity is like. All right. The word sincere comes from an interesting Latin word. It's actually two Latin words, sin and sere. Sin and sere. And it literally means without wax. Without wax. Because in ancient times, what would happen is you would go and you want to buy a marble stone. But there were guys who were con artists, and what they would do is they would try to sell to you a marble stone, but it had a crack in it. And you wanted to know, has it got a crack in it, or has it not got a crack in it? And what they would do is they would cover up the crack with wax. So you wanted to know, is this stone with wax or without wax? And what you would do is you would actually heat up the stone. And what happens to wax? When you heat it up, it melts. And when you see it melting, you see that this stone is with wax. It's a fake. So your children are at this stage are looking at you and they want to know, Mom, do you talk the talk? Right? And as long as you're not authentic, as long as you, when you feel the heat and you're now under pressure and they see that wax melting, they're going to be like, so why should I listen to you? Right? They're starting to question things. You can con your way through the toddler years, can't you? Oh, I love you, I love you. Meanwhile, you're a dubious, dodgy character, right? But now at this stage, they're questioning you. They're like, but Dad, do you always do that? Dad, did you do that when you were young? You know? All right? They start to resist physical affection from parents, so it's normal, all right? Especially with boys, okay? The hormones kick in, and in particular, so with boys, it's the testosterone. And so sometimes you see cheekiness, you see them questioning you and so on. It's not that, ooh, they're now so rebellious and now I need to do this and do that and so on. If you're a pastor like myself, you know, I've established a number of churches and so on. Oh, now we really need to pray, you know, deliverance for this child and so on. No, it's not, okay. It's just that their testosterone levels have gone up, right? And testosterone is your power hormone. Right? And now the thing to do is, how do I parent this child during these particular years? Now, here's the thing. How you diagnose a problem determines the solution, doesn't it? All right? So sometimes I get called into a family and they say, Paul, can you speak to our 14-year-old daughter? We've got issues with her. We don't like the way she's behaving. Then I go in and I ask more than 2 questions deep. must always ask people more than 2 questions deep. I asked them more than 2 questions deep, and guess what I discover? The problem isn't with the teenage daughter. The problem is with the dysfunctional family system. Then I have to speak to the parents and I say, you know what your problem is? You're disciplining your daughter like she's a 5-year-old, but she's now 14. And that's where the problem is. Okay? So how you diagnose the problem, just watch out for that because it determines the solution. All right? Then the brain process. You know, the brain process of a child is only fully developed at 18 years of age. So sometimes we've got this thing where we see this person who's really developed, you know, maybe they're now taller than you, they've overtaken their mom in terms of height, etc. But we forget that in terms of brain development, your brain is only fully developed at 18. Isn't that interesting? All right? So let's remember that. And then they start forming strong and complex friendships. And I know some of those, so those of you here, you've got the girl child. You're a mother or a father to the girl child. You know what I'm talking about, right? Where the friendships, that's a big thing. And there are a lot of discussions around that, emotions around that. Let me say something. When a girl turns 12, that's a very delicate age. And very often, I'm so glad that there are a lot of dads here today. Because very often, when that girl is 12 years of age, that's where she really needs the voice of the father to affirm her and to validate her. That's where she needs to be going on dates with dad, where dad is saying, you're my princess, you're so beautiful, I really enjoy spending time with you, okay? And if you're a single mom here, make sure she has that father figure who's doing that. Because I'm telling you right now, if she doesn't find it in dad, what does she begin to do? She starts looking for it in boys, okay? She starts looking for it in other male figures. And we find that the girls who don't do so, who don't look for it in boys, if they're getting attention from the teacher because they're so smart and they're so clever, what happens? They get addicted to high marks. I must get 100%. Then they become perfectionists. And then when they get into the workplace, what happens? They become workaholics. In psychology, there's what we call transference, where the things, the nature of those relationships, the dysfunction in the relationships as you're growing up, if there were gaps there, you then transfer them where? Later on in life. So we see these ladies now. I remember counseling a particular lady. She had been unfairly dismissed in a particular organization, and she was now in between jobs. And she became a workaholic. And I shared this principle with her, and she could identify with it. She said, Paul, that's so true, what you're saying. All right? She said, Paul, my husband almost divorced me because for the last 2 years, I've literally been going to work at 5 a.m., all right? About 5 or 6 in the morning. I think it was 5. And then coming back at 7, then we have dinner, and she had 3 boys, Then we have dinner, then afterwards I'm working again. But there's this thing of, I need to please this authority figure, I need to please this one, I can't disappoint anyone. And some people say to me, Paul, my job is draining me. Your job isn't draining you, you just have draining moments at work. Paul, my job is stressful. Your job isn't stressful, you just have stressful moments at work, okay? There was a lady I was coaching recently in one of the pharmaceuticals, and we were talking about this. She had lost her mom about a year ago or so. And I said, what is draining you? What are your draining moments? She says, Paul, you know the usual. When I go home, it's the kids. The kids drain me. We're renovating our house at the moment, and they want to play with me while I'm doing that, and I find it draining. You know what I said to her? I said, your kids are not draining you. And this is so powerful. I said to her, your kids are not draining you. Do you know what's draining you? You've created debilitating rules for yourself about what a perfect mother is. That's what's draining you. You are trying to be like your mom was. Her mom was a headmistress or deputy head. I'm not saying anything about that. You know, her mom was a classic nurturer. And so when she felt stressed out, she'll just go to her mom's place. She's like, my mom will she feels me, she understands. She's so empathetic, Paul, and she'll make me a meal. You know, some of you have got moms like that, right? She gets me. My husband doesn't always. I think men are like that, Paul. I'm like, not all men, but anyway. And I said, your mom was a classic nurturer, but because you're not a classic nurturer and wired in the same way as her, you're feeling guilty all the time. She says, Paul, spot on. That's so true. And you know what, Paul? My sister is also a bit like that. She's an occupational therapist, and she's always telling us, this is what we must do with the kids, this is what we must do with the kids. So there's that pressure. And I said, you know what? I said to her this. I said, you know what? The way you are wired is what your kids need. Everything that you are, how you are wired, that's what your kids need. not what your mom was like, not what your sister is like. And I said, your kids are probably the kind of kids that love working, like doing practical things at home, like joining in whatever you're doing. She says, Paul, you know what? I felt terrible because on Saturday we just spent the day painting the house, doing various things in terms of renovations, and the kids joined in. And I felt bad, like I felt like I'm a bad mom. I said, but how did your kids find it? She says, they loved it. Okay? So that's just important. Often it's the debilitating rules we've created for ourselves. And when I work with people, I say to them, write down all your debilitating rules. This is what I say to them. Write down all your debilitating rules that you've created for yourself. Not empowering rules, but debilitating ones. Then I said, and then in a column next to that, write out the counter argument. In other words, what else could be true? What else could be true? And it's amazing what comes out of that. Is that useful? Okay. At this age, they're also showing more interest in friends and less interest in the family. So we had a family occasion recently, and Samuel was saying to me, my eldest son, he was like, oh, I wish I could go to Johan's. You know, he's got a friend called Johan, right? And it's that age. It doesn't mean they don't like you. It just means they're at a developmental stage of individuation where they're actually finding part of their identity in groups of friends, okay? And becoming their own person apart from you. And that's not always a bad thing. If they don't find their identity apart from you, there's what we call enmeshment that takes place. It's where you don't know where you end and your child begins. And I see this in particular with a lot of moms. You know, you say to them, what's your favorite food? Oh, Paul, you know, the kids like this. My hubby likes this. No, what's your favorite food? You know what? We're so fortunate because nowadays we can afford this. What's your favorite food? And you realize that this mom doesn't actually know anymore what she likes because she's doing everything for everyone else, including the neighbor's dog, and has forgotten about herself, right? It happens a lot, doesn't it? One lady I was coaching, it was interesting. For homework, I literally said to her, in the next 2 weeks, I want you to do something for yourself. Manicure, pedicure, one of those things. A couple of weeks later, we had the next session. I said, so, how was your homework? She says, Paul, I'm really struggling with that homework. Okay? Come on, moms, you know what I'm talking about. And some dads, you go to the shop and you buy everything for everyone else, but you can't buy something for yourself. I'm one of those few men out there who enjoys clothes shopping with my wife. I'm one of those men out there who enjoys clothes shopping with my wife, all right? Partly because when she goes, sometimes she feels bad getting herself stuff, all right? But when I'm there, I'm like, just get it. It's fine, it's cool. So watch out for that. At this age, they're exploring their identity through hair, clothing, hobbies, and friends. What we've also seen is that a lot of parents make the mistake, particularly moms, of sweating the small stuff. So moms tend to clash with their boys very often. How many of you are mothers of boys? Okay? Watch out for this. This is for free now. This one that I'm giving you. Watch out for this. Because what will happen is you will mess up your relationship with your son because you're clashing about the small stuff, and then you're blocking intimacy with him concerning the big stuff. Let me tell you something. The fact that he takes 30 minutes to finish his dinner and not 15 minutes, the sky is not going to fall. The fact that he's got a hairstyle during the holiday that isn't your favorite hairstyle, the sky isn't going to fall. The fact that his favorite color is now gray and you think gray is dull and you prefer navy blue or pink, the sky is not going to fall. The big issues are issues of self-esteem. The big issues are issues of discipline. The big issues are issues around career choice and dreaming and believing he can be the best. Does that make sense? Okay? We see that happening a lot. So just pick your battles. Think about it. The last time you clashed with your boy, was it because of something major? Like, oh, what are you drinking? What are you smoking? It wasn't that. Okay? What are you experimenting with? No, what was it? It was the fact that he walked very slowly upstairs to have his bath. You're like, you must run when mom tells you it's time to shower. You must shower. Okay? I had that experience recently when we're trying to get one of our boys to, you know, boys don't always shower when you want them to, you know? And sometimes you can say like, have you showered? And a couple of them would have, and the other one is kind of like, I'll be swimming tomorrow morning, so it's fine. And you want him to swim the following morning, so you're kind of like, let me just pick my battles, okay? All right. They start to understand that thoughts are private, okay? So you can't force them to tell you exactly what they're thinking at a given time. They start experiencing a greater sense of responsibility, which is very important. And then also they've got an increased attention span, all right? But often they have rapid changing interests. Now, this is so interesting for me because I think parenting is such an opportunity. Because remember that a child's personality is formed in the first 10 years of their lives. In those first 10 years of their lives, that child's personality is being formed. So we've got such a privilege to shape that as parents, haven't we? Okay? So for example, I've said, you know what? I want to create a learning culture. One of the saddest things that people say is that if you want to hide something from an African, put it in a book. You've heard that before, right? So I want my kids to be reading. But right now, they're at that life stage where they're more interested in Fortnite and other computer games. Are you feeling me here? Ladies and gentlemen, right? And so you can call the shots at home. A lot of conflict is conflict based on status. In other words, we don't have clarity about who's in charge. You're in charge. You shape the climate. You're what we call a social architect. An architect designed this lovely building, but social architects create climate. So I've said to them, guys, I want a culture of learning. Your mom and your dad are strong readers, right? We're passionate about reading. We're passionate about learning. So from now onwards, there's a reward system around your reading, okay? So for every hour and a half that you read, you'll get an extra 15 minutes game time, okay? And you know with some boys, like game time is extremely precious, okay? They love soccer. They play club soccer, right? So guys, each goal you score, you know, they like to attack and so on, extra 15 minutes game time. And what I also do is I will say to them at any given moment in time, I can say at home, guys, the next hour and a half is quiet time at home. You're either reading or practicing your musical instruments. Okay, my wife plays 3 instruments. It's inspired the boys and so on, so they also play instruments. That's what you're doing. And often my wife will arrive from training or from somewhere, and I'll be like, my love, can you hear the house is so quiet, so quiet. And then Daniel, my youngest, came and he said something. He says, guys, Dad was right. Once you really get into a book, it can actually be quite interesting, you know? All right? And so you can actually create those types of routines in order to create culture in the home. All right? Just ask yourself, and you can do it with any type of culture, even in the workplace, right? Ask yourself, what culture do I want to create? Do I want to create a culture of teamwork? Do I want to create a culture of respect, right? Now, how do you create culture? Culture is created by what you teach. So if you want to create a culture of teamwork, you have to teach teamwork. If you want to create a culture of respect and good manners, you have to teach them, right? So we have moments where we'll actually watch certain YouTube clips and we sit down as a family and we cover a particular topic. Right now we're watching Andy Stanley and he's doing a series on me and my big mouth. And it's been super duper powerful. Because I've been saying to my kids, you know what, guys? Yes, you've got a good sense of humor. That's wonderful. But humor should always be used to build up people, not to tear them down. And I'm reinforcing it. So you create culture by what you teach. You also create culture by what you model. By what you model. Let me give you an example. Everyone just look at me. I promise you I don't mind. All right? Is everyone looking at me? Yeah. Okay. Touch your cheek. Now, many of you are touching your chin, and you still are. Okay? Now I understand English is not all our first language, okay? Sometimes the English, we struggle with the English. All right? But why are you touching your chin when I said touch your cheek? Because you saw me. So I'm telling you right now, your children will not just do what you say. They will do what they see you doing. If you're not spending time with them, if you're not tender to your spouse, they're going to grow up and they're going to think it's okay. I counsel lots of couples and you see them. You know, it's like, my husband shouts at me, he raises his voice. And he's like, but that's how we grew up. We're fine. We just direct with each other. I didn't know it was shouting. All right? So we do what we see being modeled. You also create culture by something else. You create culture by what you reward. That's why the reward management system is very important. Are you rewarding just for performance, or are you also rewarding for effort? Because your child could be getting in the 80% when they should be getting in the 90%. But if you keep rewarding them from 80%, but they're not trying, guess what? You're rewarding the wrong thing. So you create culture by what you teach. You create culture by what you model. You create culture by what you reward. You create culture by what you celebrate. What's being celebrated? You see, when it comes to disciplining kids, you focus on one thing at a time usually, don't you? If If you try and cover everything, it doesn't work and they get confused. So sometimes if we're focused on manners in our household, I might say, my love, in front of all the kids. Guess, we call each other, my wife and I call each other my love or my precious one, not after names of foods like some of you do. You know, sugar, honey, pumpkin. If you travel a lot, my pot course, okay? Right? So I say to her, my love, guess what? I was so impressed with Jaden. Today, he greeted those parents at school before they had greeted him. You know, that was really great. And all other boys are like, yeah, but I also do that, but I also do that. And after a while, you start realizing you're creating culture. You create culture by the rituals you have. If you want to create a culture of belonging, let's say even in the workplace, celebrate birthdays. A birthday is the only time you're celebrating someone for just existing. Think about it. The guy has been given a bad performance review last week, right? But this week, you're celebrating their birthday. He's a jolly good fellow, he's a jolly good fellow. And you're thinking, hey, meanwhile, back at the ranch, I don't know, right? But you're celebrating them just for existing. So it's a basic thing children need, that's that sense of unconditional acceptance. Does that make sense? Okay? You create culture by what you measure. Whatever culture you are wanting to create in your household, you have to be measuring the particular thing. You create culture by what you inspect. If you go home, for example, and if you say to your helper at home, right? I'm sure most of you have helpers. I'm just assuming, you know, right? And you say, I would like you to dust the furniture every day. Will it happen? No, it won't happen, right? Typically, it won't happen just because you said so. But if you go and you do a bit of an inspection, and you're like, oh, there's still some dust here. Oh, there's still some dust here. You just need to do that for 3 days in a row, and you've created culture. And you don't have to inspect every single day. Does that make sense? All right. Culture is also created by how parents react in a time of crisis. So your children are watching you not just when times are good. They're also watching you when times are bad and you're stressed out. They're wondering, where does dad go? Does dad go and speak to mom in a gentle way and they work things out? Or does dad run to the bottle? Okay, they're observing all these things. I can tell you right now. Okay? The challenge is that often everything you're doing with them has confounding variables. For example, you might be here by yourself and your spouse isn't. Okay? And maybe your spouse has got a different stance to you. Let me tell you something, when it comes to disciplining kids, agreement between the two of you is so important. Then for some of you, you're a single mom or a single dad, or you're in a blended family situation. Let me just say something very quickly about blended families. If you're a stepmom, embrace that child as your child, okay? Don't have the stepmom syndrome. I was coaching someone the other day and they were saying, yeah, Paul, because this like my husband's child, you know, he came through now, he stays with us and I can't discipline him in the same way that I discipline my own kids, you know, because he'll start thinking it's the stepmom. And I said, you need to make a decision. You need to embrace him like your own child, that if you're under this roof, this is what happens. These are the rules, right? You show him strong discipline, but at the same time, show him strong love, right? I said, take him on dates by himself, not with the other kids, by himself, and affirm him. And I gave her tips around that. All right. So as I share these things, I know each of you are saying, but Paul, my situation is different. Paul, my situation is unique. And I haven't got time to cover every single situation. All right. So the climate of the home and how the children respond to that shapes them for life. So guess what? When I've been training or doing some seminar somewhere in Joburg and I'm driving back to Centurion where I live and I get onto the highway, guess what I have to say to myself? I have to put on my dad cap and I have to put on my husband cap because I'm going into a different environment. Here's the problem. A lot of parents today are very good at preparing to go to work in the morning. Few parents are good at preparing to go back home afterwards. Okay. And a lot of times we put our best foot forward at work, don't we? We dress nicely, we talk nicely, we give our clients and our customers and our stakeholders our best. But then our loved ones, who we say we love so much, we give them our leftovers. We give them our leftovers emotionally, we give them our leftovers intellectually and physically. All right? You have some very super duper organized corporate women coming home and saying, but Paul, why are my kids so highly strung? And I just say to them, they're absorbing you. Because you see, someone once said, consciously, you teach what you know. Unconsciously, you pass on who you are. Consciously, you teach what you know. Unconsciously, you pass on who you are. Doesn't matter what you're teaching. If the stuff inside you isn't great, that's what you are passing on. So what typically happens in dysfunctional homes, and most families are fairly dysfunctional. Okay, there's some degree of dysfunction. You have children that become adults, right? And they react to the pain of their upbringing in different ways. Firstly, you've got the hero. And the way the hero becomes a hero is partly because that was the self-image of the family. You know those families where everyone's, yeah, but have you seen how well his grades are? How good his grades are? Have you seen how he's performing? And very often that child is like, oh, okay. So despite all the pain I'm experiencing, this is what will get me acceptance. So I'm now going to be a hero. And you see them pushing and pushing and pushing. And I've coached lots of people like this because later on in life, they're like, Paul, you know what? I think I'm trying too hard. These are people who say, you know what? I've got this successful legal practice, but you know what? I really wanted to be something else. I'm going to buy a franchise and just do something that's more flexible, right? Or in their 40s, they have a nervous breakdown. Why? They weren't doing things that they were wired to do. They were doing things because that's what gains acceptance for them. And heroes are very difficult to help because very often, because of their success on the outside, they're not in touch with their emotional state on the inside. So you have the hero. Then you've got the joker. You know, you hear of all these comedians, these stand-up comedians, and then you hear of the pain that they've been through, okay? That's the joker. The way they cope with pain is to joke about it. I'm sharing you these things so that when your child is troubled, you're just careful now, oh, what's driving them to certain behavior? If your child is the joker, they joke about everything. Get them to a place where they can verbalize what they're going through at an emotional level, especially with boys who aren't as verbal. You know, fine, okay, one-word answers, right, about certain things. So watch out for the joker who minimizes things. Then you've got the caretaker. This is the person who's counseling mom, counseling dad. You know, taking care of everyone. And they find it very difficult to ask for help. And later on in life, some of them become social workers, but they're busybodies trying to sort out everyone else's life because their identity was formed in that dysfunctional home in that way. Then you've got the lost child or the loner. This is the person who hates the conflict, hears the tempers, the raised voices and everything, and they literally block out the pain by giving themselves a new identity. So the boys will escape into their computer games, the girls will escape into their fantasy books and that kind of thing. And they literally pretend that this person doesn't exist. Like, I don't exist, I'm really this person. And as they grow up as adults, sometimes they really hate conflict and they'll literally shut down when there's a fight. And they end up with a misbelief where they'll say, conflict is bad, someone always gets hurt. So then we have to coach them in terms of, you know, you can leverage off conflict, you can engage in that difficult conversation. All right? Then you've got the scapegoat. Scapegoat is sometimes known as the acting out child. They act out how they're really feeling. So they're always in trouble. They're always in the headmaster or headmistress's office, right? They're always getting demerits and that kind of thing at school, but they're in touch with their emotions. So the family is always blaming them. Like, Paul, can you help us? Our child is giving us problems. But that child is emotionally honest, and they're the ones telling everyone, saying, hey guys, I hate my dad. Hey guys, my family just pretends. Why do you think you never invited to our house? They don't want you to see what's really going down. Okay? And you know what? Although they're naughty at school, if you actually look at the treasure within them and you draw it out, these become such amazing adults at a certain point, right? Because they're in touch with their emotions. Some of you were like that, so you know what I'm talking about. All right? So just identify, where's my child going and how am I shaping them? So what are some ingredients of a functional family? Maintenance. You know, sometimes we don't have a standard in terms of what's the functional family. So you're trying to be like dad, trying to be like mom. No, what's the functional family? What is your responsibility as a parent? Maintenance. What do we mean by maintenance? You know, just providing for their basic needs. Are we doing that? Lots of parents today aren't. In many homes today, if social workers went in, they'll be like, yo, what's going on? I work with lots of couples, and one of the big complaints is like, he is not contributing, he is not doing anything. And you have these ladies on small salaries trying to cover everything. You know what I'm talking about? So basic maintenance, all right? Then there's nurture. Nurture. When was the last time you gave your son or your daughter a hug and just said, I love you so much? See, one of the biggest needs every child needs, despite the fact that they're misbehaving, is to know that they're loved unconditionally by mom and dad. So I had an experience recently where I had to discipline my middle son. I think it was on a Thursday night or something like that, right? And on the Friday, he was in inter-schools athletics. All three of them were. And I had to make a decision, and I actually visualized myself. Many times when people dream, they just dream about the future, but it's important to actually visualize today. How am I going to be? And I saw myself going to the athletics. I saw myself cheering him on, saying, go Jades, you can do it. And I wanted to reinforce to him that even though dad was upset last night, okay, today we're in a space where dad is cheering you on. Just because dad had to discipline you last night doesn't mean he doesn't love you. And that's one of the big gifts we can give our children, this type of nurture. And it's not just the job of mom. And those of you, how many of you are fathers of daughters? You're men here and you've got girls. And one of the challenging things is when your girls are now 12, 13, what happens? I remember speaking to a guy and he says, Paul, sometimes there's that awkwardness because you want to show your daughter physical affection, but you start wondering, okay, what's not okay? What will they feel comfortable with? To what extent can I squeeze them? You know, because with other women, you're sort of like, hey, you know, type of thing. What do I do with my daughter and so on? And it can sometimes be awkward. But as a father, she wants to feel your nurture. Does that make sense? Okay. Remember, we don't so much remember what people say to us. We remember how they made us feel. Ask yourself right now, and you can ask your kids, guys, how do I make you feel? When dad walks in, when mom walks into the room, how do you feel? I had to work late the other night. I was doing I was doing some counseling and so on. And my wife said to me, yeah, the boys missed you at dinner. Daniel was saying, dinner is very quiet when dad is not here. And I realized, okay, I felt significant. A sense of significance is that feeling of I matter. When I walk into a room, my presence is felt. You want to feel that when you're at home. But ask them, what's the impact of my presence? What's the impact of my presence? Oh, we feel more relaxed when you're around. Oh, we enjoy it. We feel empowered. We feel energized. Or, hey, we get nervous. I remember growing up and, you know, we were 4 boys in our family and we'd be doing the dishes and so on. We'd be very relaxed, break dancing, you know, that era, doing all sorts of things. And the moment we would see the lights at the gate, we had a long driveway. I grew up in Zim, had a long driveway, all right? And it's now quite late at night. And we knew dad is back. All of a sudden, the military kind of system kicked in, you know, and we had a routine. You know, you go, you get your briefcase. Now, listen very carefully. Listen to this. Listen to this. How many of you were brought up in families where you're told children must be seen, not heard? I'm sure there's more, right? Raise your hand. Okay, right? You know what I've seen happening? People who are raised in those environments, have you noticed what happens when they're now in the workplace today? It plays out again. Transference happens. And you see them, they're sitting on mancos, excos, and so on. You see them seated there, and they'll just wait for the boss to say whatever he needs to say, and then they make sure that they agree with whatever he has to say. But you know what? If you're sitting there and you've always got a blank look on your face, you'll see where I'm going with this. People will fill in the blank. You've always got a blank look on your face, people will fill in the blank. And they might fill it in without telling you what they're filling it in with. They'll just walk off and say, she's not confident enough. She's 3 years away from that promotion she's so desperate for. So you have to tell your own story. If you don't tell your story, someone else will. If you don't tell your story, someone else will. And here's the catch. You might not like their version. So that's why I want to raise boys. I want to raise kids who are confident even with authority figures. But they'll only be like that if they're confident even with their parents. And sometimes it can seem like they're being a bit cheeky. Like recently, the kids laid out mattresses to watch a movie at home. And then they said, yeah, mom, dad, you can sit on the couches, but yeah, here are mattresses, and we're just going to have a nice sort of feast tonight, and we're going to watch. And then I got onto one of the mattresses of my middle son and was super comfortable and lots of pillows and everything. Then at a certain point, he said to me, Dad, can you please get off? You know, you're making my mattress warm. We're going to sleep there the whole night. You know, I don't like sleeping on warm mattresses. You're making it warm. And afterwards, I just thought to myself, wait a minute, whose house is this? And I was triggered, you know. I said, Jaden, can I tell you something? If I wanted you to sleep in the kitchen tonight, you would have to sleep in the kitchen. Do you know what I'm saying? Jaden, do you pay rent here? And so on. But you know what? I would rather he's confident with me, he's outspoken with me, and not label it as rebellion, but confidence with his father. So that when he grows up as an adult, he's also confident with authority figures. Okay? Because it doesn't just suddenly change. Inclusion. In families, we need inclusion. They need to feel like, hey, I belong here, and I don't have to pay rent to stay here. Okay? Their esteem is important. Differentiation. In other words, in a family that is healthy, that is not dysfunctional, we recognize their individuality. We recognize the fact that, you know what, you don't have to like the food that mom likes. You don't have to like the sport that your brother likes, okay? There's differentiation. In a lot of families, they become dysfunctional because we want everyone to be the same. We share the same values, but we don't necessarily share the same interests, and that's fine. So just be careful at this age what you force your kids to do and what you force your kids to like. I find myself sitting down and my kids play a lot of soccer, but they don't enjoy watching it as much as I do. And sometimes I'm like, guys, to be a good soccer player, you need to learn. Come, watch the whole game. But sometimes that can be torture for a young boy to be sitting there 90 minutes glued to the TV. At a certain point, one of my kids says, yeah, but Dad, we prefer playing than watching. So they'll watch a bit, get annoyed or something like that. Hey, guys, yeah, let's go practice our striking. And they'll go outside, and that's okay. All right? They need to have understanding, and the way you communicate understanding in a household is listening. Listening. And it's listening with empathy, and there are 3 types of empathy. The first type of empathy is called emotional empathy. What is emotional empathy? That's I feel you. So if I say, guys, I've got a migraine, and you say, oh, Paul, where's it sore? Where's it sore? Ah, ouch. Oh, okay. Oh, Paul, how'd you keep on teaching and you've got a migraine, right? That's I feel you, that's emotional empathy. Do that with your kids. There's a bond that's formed. Children are more likely to obey their parents when the emotional bond is stronger. So sometimes we want our kids to obey us, but there's no emotional bond. And a quick way of doing that is empathy. The second type of empathy is cognitive empathy. And cognitive empathy is I get you. I get you. If I were to ask you, who's your best friend? You'll give me a name, or 2 or 3, right? If I were to ask you afterwards and I say, why are they your best friend? What would you say? You'll say, she gets me. He gets me. Paul, it's not stressful when I'm around them. I can just be myself. I don't have to pretend. I don't feel victimized. I don't feel judged. That's what children need. And you communicate that through cognitive empathy. The third type of empathy is an interesting one. It's called empathic concern. And empathic concern is basically, I'm here for you. I'm here for you, right? Oh, is your child sick? You have to go. Don't worry, I'll cover for you. Now, very often you'll find that children actually need all 3. There was a time when my wife was sick. She was not feeling well some years ago. And she said, my love, I'm not feeling well. Then I thought, okay, cool. I'll cover the kids. I'll sort out the dinner. I'll do this. I'll make a plan. So I'm thinking I'm the hero doing all these things. Later on that evening, she asked me, she says, my love, I don't know if you really understand how I'm feeling. Of course, I got defensive. And I was like, of course I understand how you're feeling. That's why I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm doing this. And then she said to me, and we started arguing about it. And I said, you know what the problem is here? What you need right now is emotional empathy, which is I feel you. What I'm giving you right now is empathic concern. I'm here for you. Very often people need all 3, including your children, okay? And with all of these things, some of you might not be doing this. In fact, often when I speak on empathy, that's where people are like, Paul, can I give you my hubby's number, please? Can I give you? You now understand it. You can teach them, all right? Recreation. Home must be a place where there's fun. Home must be a place where there's fun, all right? And very often fun, what does it look like? There's laughter. If there's no laughing at home, I can tell you there's a dysfunction there already, okay? Laughter is one of those things that changes the climate in a room very, very quickly. And you want to have laughter at home. You know what? Having a good sense of humor is actually a leadership quality. And having a good sense of humor is not the same as cracking jokes. You can crack a joke but have a bad sense of humor. Good sense of humor is where you can laugh at yourself. It's where you can relieve the tension in a room or just before a meeting, right? It's where you can use shock tactics, where you speak out what everyone else is whispering. That's a good sense of humor, all right? And it's important to have that at home, and also recreation, right? Age appropriateness. In a functional family, things must be age appropriate. So at a certain age, you have to protect your children from certain things. But then you also, at a certain age, have to prepare them for certain things. So you've got a lot of parents who are just like, yeah, you know, to their 10-year-old, no, we must expose them to this. This is what the world is like. But they're not emotionally ready to be exposed to those things. So ask yourself, and I haven't got time to go into the details of this, what do I need to protect my kids from? That's why you've got, you know, PG block stuff, etc. on DSTV, right? What do I need to protect my kids from? And then what do I need to prepare them for? So it's crucial that you're the one who's actually talking to them about the birds and the bees. Okay? Some of the things can be reinforced by the school and other people, but it's your responsibility. You understand? The education of our children in all areas of life is the parents' responsibility. We delegate aspects of it to the schools. Okay, but ultimately it's our responsibility. So sometimes we sit back and the teachers will like what I'm saying. Sometimes we sit back and we're like, yeah, but they must teach them that. So what if they explain to them? But the real deeper issue is it's awkward for you talking about certain things because your father or your mother never spoke to you about those things. So I made a decision that when my kids learn about certain things like the birds and the bee, which they have from me primarily, okay? So my 12-year-old has had 2 talks with me. The young ones have just had 1 talk, right? But it's not a once-off thing. It's something that you do on an ongoing basis as they get older, and they have to be age-ready for the depth that you go into. Then the school had a talk on it, and they had to get parents' permission, and I said, cool, it's fine, you can go. I just want blow by blow. Afterwards, what did they cover? And I was so proud of Samuel, my 12-year-old, when he came home and he says, yeah, Dad, they covered X, Y, Z. And he told me. And I said, okay, and how did you find it and so on? He says, yeah, there was just one thing that they said that I know you disagree with and so on. But I was glad that he was conscious of that. So he was going and he's hearing various things, but he's able to say, let me compare this with what my dad has taught me. Does that make sense? Okay, you can't delegate this to other people. Don't complain one day where they're not open with you about girls and boys and, when they want to get married and so on, and they're talking to everyone else except for you, and you're distant from it and you start feeling left out. Okay, but you can shape that at a young age. They also need healthy discipline. The word discipline is an interesting one, but they need healthy discipline. And let me just say this. They need it because it makes them feel secure. When you discipline your child, they feel loved, they feel secure. When you don't, they don't. Okay? And also to express their spirituality without being mocked or ridiculed. All right? What are some parenting destroyers? I want to take you through some parenting destroyers, common ones. I've shared with you. Sweating the small stuff. Sweating the small stuff. Ask yourself what's important. You remember when we were growing up, we had MIDI systems, beatboxes, right? With all those graphic equalizers. Do you remember that? And do you remember how some people thought the best sound is when everything is on 100? Okay? Do you know that some people, in terms of their personalities, that's how they're actually wired, right? Everything is on 100. My grandmother's kitten died. It's a crisis. My boss didn't like my presentation. It's a crisis. That client has dumped me and left me. It's a crisis. Everything is on 100. We have to train ourselves at home what's important and what's not so important, because our kids will get the cue from us, won't they? Okay, so don't sweat the small stuff. Not everything has to be on 100. Okay, and I shared with you the whole principle of this a bit earlier on. Another one is lack of delegation. Lack of delegation. Sometimes if you're that super mom, super woman, and you're doing everything, we have to teach our kids how to work. We have to give them chores, and the chores don't always have to be linked to pocket money, all right, or some reward system. We have to teach them how to chip in. Sometimes for the bigger chores, of course, there's a reward system with that. But sometimes it's just the basics, let me help you. So this lady was sharing with me yesterday because her stepson started living with them. And she says, what, they're basic things I taught my kids. But his mom obviously didn't, that when you're finished eating, you go wash your dish and put it on the rack, right? Says, I see glasses just piling up. No, why don't you just keep using the same glass? Why do these glasses have to just pile up next to you? Who's going to wash them for you, right? And those are basic things. And today, a lot of times, things are given to our domestic helpers that our kids should be doing for themselves. Okay, it's not about who will do it better. It's about what are they learning in the process. Remember, parenting is about training, isn't it? It's about training, okay? So that's important. And if you've got a firstborn, and if you as a parent are a bit perfectionistic, just watch out for that. Because some firstborns then become perfectionists. If you look at the ratio of perfectionists out there, a lot of firstborns are. And perfectionism isn't good. If you study the science of success, people who become successful focus on mastery. Am I getting better as opposed to am I perfect? Don't try to be the perfect mom, rather be the growing mom. Don't try to be the perfect dad, rather be the growing dad. I'm not where I was. I'm certainly not where I want to be, but I'm certainly not where I was. I'm growing, I'm developing. Right? If you're a perfectionist, what tends to happen is if you keep redoing what your child has just done, they end up not making their bed. They're like, mom will just do it anyway. What's the point of trying? We see that also taking place. Okay. What do your kids need from you that only you can give? The rest you can delegate. So there was a time a couple of years ago, I was doing a talk for entrepreneurs on a Saturday morning. Samuel says to me, Dad, why is it just mom coming to watch me play? Why is it just mom coming? Why aren't you coming? Oh, no, I'm going to do a talk. I have to do a talk. Oh, Dad, why can't you get someone else to do that talk so you can come to my soccer? What is he communicating? I only have one dad. There are other people who can speak to entrepreneurs, but I only have one dad. Okay? So ask yourself, what do my kids need from me that only I can give them? Give them that. The rest you can delegate. There's a lady, I think she's COO now, one of the major banks, and she's got 2 teenage daughters. And she'll say to me, you know what, Paul, I'm a good cook. But to be honest with you, standing in front of a stove for an hour each day isn't actually the best use of my time. From 4:30 through to 8, that's my time with my girls. And what I'm doing with them is their homework and that kind of thing, connecting with them, bonding, right? And she said to me, Paul, I can tell you all about World War I, World War II. So ask yourself, what are the things you can delegate? Some people are like, Paul, but in my culture, you can change your culture. You know what I mean? You can change aspects of your culture. You can say, this is my household, this is how we're going to do it. I'll take the good aspects of my culture, but this aspect, it doesn't work for me. It's not productive. As opposed to toiling and toiling. You've just come from work, now you've changed it to your home clothes, now you're spending 2 hours trying to cook the perfect meal. Not the best use of your time, right? Also watch out in terms of what you call things. I was coaching a particular person. She's a great lawyer. And she likes being efficient, like everything must be quick, quick, quick. But one of her kids is slow. She's got 3 kids. One of her kids is slow, right? And she says, Paul, it's frustrating, it's frustrating. I said, don't call it homework. Don't say I'm doing homework with my kids. Say it's my quality time with my kids. It's my emotional bonding with them. When you call something a particular word, it can affect how your brain experiences it. How many of you like admin? Okay. I can take you wherever I go and you can help me, right? But here's the thing. For those of us who don't like admin, we mustn't call it paperwork. That's very demotivating. Oh, I'm now going to do my paperwork, right? But when we call it something like, you know what, I'm going to spend time, I've got a free morning today after lecturing, so I'm going to actually spend some time reorganizing my world and making myself more effective for my clients. I'm passionate about my clients and giving them a good service plus one service, right? It's what you call the particular thing. Don't just say, I'm doing homework with the kids. No, it's your quality time with them, right? And often that's when they open up, when they spend time with you. Just think about that, especially with your boys. You find that you speak to boys and you say, so how was your day? Fine, right? Find creative ways of asking them questions, right? Find creative ways of asking them questions. And also you'll find that boys tend to open up more as you do activities with them. Have you noticed that? Right? Now we're playing soccer together, kicking the ball and so on. Oh, Dad, you should see what this guy was saying at school today. But when I asked you, so how are your friends? What are they saying? You didn't answer. Now we're playing with each other. Hey, Dad, you know what? Okay? Neglect of marriage. For those of you who are married, this is crucial, crucial, crucial. The best gift you can give your kids is a good marriage. If you're talking and you're connecting, husband and wife, talking like this, right? And your kids come and try and disturb you, don't feel bad saying, I'm just talking to Dad. When they go away, do you know that they go away feeling more secure? Because they know mom loves dad. There's a good vibe here. All right? So just watch out for that. Some people try so hard to be the good mother, then they neglect their marriage, and then their kids still turn out funny. And they're like, well, what's happened? What's wrong? Oh, no, because what the kids saw made them feel insecure. Does that make sense? Right? And then those of you who are single moms or single dads and so on, it's so important to do it amicably and to make sure that they've still got the father figure there. There's a reason why it's a man and a woman together raising up the child, okay? Both are important, all right? There's lots I could say on marriage, obviously. Then there's compensation parenting. It's where you do the opposite of what your parents did because you didn't like it. So I remember speaking to a particular lady some time back, and I said, so how do you guys discipline your kids? How do you create boundaries for them? And she says, no, we do a boundaryless parenting approach, okay? So I speak to this lady and I say to her, how do you discipline your kids? And she said, we do boundaryless parenting, we don't have boundaries. And I said, did you have strict parents? She said, yes, my parents were very, very strict, and that's why we've decided to just have no boundaries with our kids and just let things flow. That's called compensation parenting, right? Where you resent how you were raised, and instead of taking the good from it, you don't want to associate yourself with it, and you're going to do the very opposite. We see it happening a lot. I see it even in leadership in organizations where people say, my former boss used to micromanage all the time. I hated it. So Paul, I just let my guys do their thing and I don't micromanage. But then you're not on top of what's going on, okay? You don't have to be the extreme opposite of what you didn't like in your parents. That's crucial. Then there's binge parenting, what I call binge parenting. This is where you say, don't worry, kids, I'll make it up for you during our annual holiday. Your kids don't want to go on an annual holiday with a stranger. Your kids want to experience that routine of knowing every day, every week, this is what I'm experiencing. Even if it's just that half an hour you have with them, right? Day in, day out, day in, day out. But often it's like, but you guys, at least I'm providing for you and you can go to that good school, Crawford. You know what it's like and so on. But don't worry, in December, they don't want to feel like I'm going on holiday with this person who's a stranger to me. Okay? Binge parenting. Rather do a few things well and consistently, right? Then the popularity contest. You are a parent first before you're their friend. You're a parent first before you're the popular kid in the house. And just because you weren't the popular kid when you were growing up at school, now you're trying to heal that wound, at home. Just because your family or your husband's family has rejected you, don't now look for those needs to be met in the kids. It happens a lot, doesn't it? Sometimes you'll find women complaining, saying, my husband and I, we're not really talking that much and so on. Then I'm like, so how's the marriage going? How do you survive? And you see that they're now best friends with the daughter, and the daughter counsels them, but she's only 12. Daughter's counseling me, we're talking deep things, and then it's overshare. She's not emotionally ready for that. Yes, connect with your daughter, but there's certain things where she just needs to be a daughter. All right? And then come for marriage coaching, and we'll help you in terms of, the depth of intimacy with your spouse. Okay? So you're their parent first before being the popular kid in the house. Okay? And it's much better being unpopular with them for a while for their own good, right? Than being popular, but then they suffer in the end. Okay, misplaced needs, that's what I've just mentioned, okay? Perfectionism is a big one, and I've been talking about this, right? If any of you struggle with perfectionism, by the way, there's some guys who've developed, it's a 9-lesson module. You contact me, I'll give it to you, 9-lesson module on overcoming perfectionism, all right? So what debilitating rules have you created for yourself? What debilitating rules have you created for your kids? Where you're like, what's the point of this rule that I've created? Okay? What empowering rules can you replace these with? What empowering rules can you replace these with? And then also a lot of parenting today is out of balance. What do I mean by that? Sometimes there's too much affection and no discipline. That's the passive parent. The parent who has to kiss you 3,000 times before they leave you at school, right? And then they drive off and they're feeling guilty as they're on George Storer going home or going to work. I didn't love them enough. I didn't kiss them enough. Oh, I'm working, mom. I'm away from them all day. Oh, I'm terrible. And you never feel good enough, okay? That's the passive parent. All right? And they don't discipline. And then you also have too much discipline and no affection. That's the authoritarian parent. Some of you grew up with them. And you can actually have this on a graph, by the way, okay? Where on the one thing, it's discipline. On the other thing, it's affection. Can you see that? Okay? Then sometimes there's no affection and no discipline, and that's the absent parent. They're not physically absent, but they're just distant. You know what? I ask so many people, and I say to them, guys, what was your father like? Did your father love you? And a lot of people will say, I know he loved me. Why do you say that? He provided, Paul, he provided, and he disciplined us. Yeah, I know he loved. Did you feel loved? You know what? My father was a distant man. He was from a different generation, Paul. And we start making all sorts of excuses. And then now when we ask you, like, how come you're struggling to actually have intimate conversation with your spouse? And then you see where it comes from. There was that distance. How come you're struggling to connect with your daughter? There was that distance that you grew up with. So you can have that parent who's the absent parent, but they're physically there. Okay? Our goal is to be authoritative. And authoritative means there's lots of affection and there's lots of discipline. Does that make sense? Lots of affection, lots of discipline. And it's great when you've got that balance. And in your household, there's always the one of you who's more of the disciplinarian than the other, right? There's the softie and then there's the tough one. Just be careful your kids don't play you off each other. I say that to my kids. Don't come to me asking for a particular thing if mom has already said no. I'll go with what mom said. The other day, my middle son said, Mom, you tell dad this because dad will always go with what you're saying. So they're coming up with all sorts of strategies. All right? Then there's also multi-generational illiteracy, where we don't understand the next generation. There's so much material out there just on the next generation, okay, and how they're wired. And one of the ways they're wired is egalitarianism. Millennials today, they like the whole thing of equality. They're like, why can't I have a say at the table? Why can't I contribute to this conversation? And there's nothing wrong with that, okay? Right? They must just do so respectfully. You see, you want your kids to understand what it's like being in authority and under authority. You see, so if I'm in a situation where I'm at home, I'm in authority and I'm telling people this is how things are going to be, right? When I get onto the highway, I'm under the authority of the Gauteng Metro. I can't say to them when they stop me, if they stop me, I never get stopped. I can't say to them, do you know who I am? Yeah. Right? That doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. When I come to your school and I'm looking for parking, I need to listen to the security guards who are telling me, this is where you park. You can't park here. You have to park here. I'm under their authority. I can't say, do you know who I am? Does that make sense? And you want to raise kids who understand that. And one of the quickest ways of doing so is get them to respect your helper at home. Get them to respect the teachers at school. You know? And it's powerful when you defer to the teachers. Don't be those defensive parents where it's like, how could that headmaster have said this to you? Or headmistress say, how I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. You're just teaching your children how not to respect authority. Rather say, oh, I'm sure they must have had a good reason for that. Let's go and find out. You're boiling inside. Let's go and find out. Let's go and check out. And then you go and you speak. Okay, I know the teachers liked what I've just said, right? Where are the teachers? Where are the teachers here? Because I don't know all of you. Okay, great. Okay, just remember your 12-year-old is not the same as you. They're not the same as you. Your 12-year-old is not the same as your 6-year-old. The dynamic is different. And those of you who've got 5-year-olds going on 20, they want to be treated the same. And sometimes you have to actually say to them, listen, your big brother is actually older than you by about 7 years. There's a bit of a gap. Yes, I know that's how mom and dad wanted it or didn't want it, etc. But that's how it is. You're not the same. Why does Samuel have to, how come he can go to bed later than us? How come he, right? That's what life is like. Then I want to give you some keys to effective parenting. You want some keys? Some quick keys. All right. Intentionally build their esteem. One of my books is on building your self-esteem. And I talk about the 6 pillars of self-esteem. Your children need your validation. You know, one of the biggest phrases when you're on holiday with your kids is what? Daddy, watch me do this. Daddy, watch me do this. What are they looking for? Validation. And you know what ends up happening? Emotional object constancy. It's a psychological term for when all the words you are speaking enter them and then don't leave anymore. And now, even when daddy isn't saying, well done, son, this boy is so confident. They're like, I'm the best. Yeah, you know, I'm really good. I know my story, right? They're confident because they've stored up all those words. So my boys will say, Daddy, who's the best? Who's the best at soccer? And you know what I'll say? We're all the same. Who's the best? Tell us. What are they craving for? Validation. And you know what? Your words as parents, father and mother, they literally, it's like 500 pounds. Wow, lots of weight. Think about it. And psychologically, people tend to remember the negative stuff more than the positive stuff. Think about it. What is the stuff you remember as you were growing up? Do you remember all the great stuff that was said about you? No, it was stored up in you and makes you feel great and so on. But the terrible stuff that was said, can be very destructive. So let's watch what we say to our kids. They literally, children see their parents as godlike. So it's almost like, so Dad, do you think I'm good or not at soccer? Now I have to be careful what I say. Because lately I've been saying, you keep saying you want to be professional and all of that, but look, you know, you have to up your game. I have to be careful what I say though. By the way, for every cold prickly that you give someone in terms of words, they actually need 8 warm fuzzies. That's actually the ratio. If you just give for every cold prickly, you give only 1 warm fuzzy, the default in the person's psyche is the cold prickly. Think about it. That's why if your wife, guys, come on, gentlemen, if your wife says to you, like, yeah, but you don't say I'm beautiful. But I told you, remember last week I said how beautiful you are and so on. Doesn't count. Okay, it has to be 5 to 1. You just criticize me all the time. You can even be like you in the court of law and be like, no, but it was 50% positive, 50 negative, and so on. No, the negative overrides the positive. That's just the reality. All right? So it's the same with our children. I sometimes feel frustrated because I'm thinking, wait a minute, this weekend, what have I really said to my boys? Some of them might be thinking that their middle name is No, because everything I'm saying, hey, no, guys, no. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. Then I say to myself, what have I actually said to shape their destiny? All right? A vacuum in this area results in transference later on in life. There's 6 pillars of self-esteem. The first one is self-confidence or self-efficacy. That's your belief about your ability. Now ask yourself today, what can I say this week? What can I say to boost their self-esteem in terms of self-efficacy, confidence, that I can do it, right? The second one is self-acceptance. That's that sense in someone that, you know what, take it or leave it, guys, this is me. Now, some people are strong on that. Other people in the workplace are still infantile. They're devastated when their boss doesn't like their presentation. Self-acceptance is, this is me, guys, warts and all. I still like myself. I'm not perfect. I'm a work in progress. I still like myself. You want to reinforce that in your kids. Then a sense of significance is another pillar of self-esteem. And that's that feeling of, I matter. Other day I was walking and I was quite tired. I arrived home, hi. I've trained up my kids to greet me first before I greet them, type of thing, you know, just respecting older people. I'm going upstairs, hi guys. And I felt a bit convicted. I was like, Paul, did you actually look at Daniel? Did you actually really look at him? Like see what he's wearing? Do you remember what he's actually wearing? Come on, is it just me, right? And then sometimes I realized, no, I wasn't being fully present. And nowadays with phones, kids complain, don't they? It's like, Mom, Dad, you're always on your phones and you're always doing this. Are you listening? One man, he was watching basketball some years ago and his son kept on saying, Dad, listen to me. I'm listening, son. It was like tail end of the game. I'm listening, son. Dad, listen to me with your eyes. And for that moment, he thought, my 5-year-old is confused about anatomy. They need to teach him properly at school, right? But he realized that his son was actually communicating a much deeper principle. Dad, I need you to be fully present. And you know what? Even as leaders, those of you who are leaders in the workplace, must always give people a look, a word, and a touch. As parents, when you arrive home, just have that ritual that when I arrive home, I'll give each child a look, a word, and a touch. It's amazing what happens. Powerful discipline to have. Otherwise, we'll just be like 2 ships, 3 ships, 5 ships in the household, passing each other by. You know what? When that child sees that Dad noticed me, Dad touched me, Dad said something to me, you know what he takes away? I'm significant. Dad was missing me. Dad was looking forward to seeing me. If you just walk and you just start, hey guys, that child at a subconscious level is feeling like, doesn't make any difference to him. He's not delighted to see me. One of the things I love doing is laughing at my kids' jokes. Because when they crack a joke or say something funny, I pack out laughing. My wife often will say to me, my love, I love it when you laugh at the kids' jokes, heartfelt laugh like that. Okay? Do you know what it does for the child? You see him, he's energized, isn't he? And then he cracks more jokes, starts acting funny again and so on. But after a while, it just boosts his sense of significance. Remember, children see you as almost godlike, and they're like, wow, so that means I'm funny. Dad laughed, so I'm funny. And they're confident now. I'll crack more jokes out there. A sense of security comes from 2 Latin words, se and curus. Se and curus, it means without care, without care. You don't want them to be continuously worried. Are we going to have food tonight? Is Dad going to come home or not come home? Is everything fine? Are my parents going to get divorced? Because often when a divorce takes place, remember, the child doesn't interpret it like an adult. As an adult, you can be like, I'm sure he can see that, Mom and Dad aren't getting on and it's better that they're actually apart. You know how a child interprets it? Dad didn't love me enough to change his ways. Dad didn't love me enough to sort out things with Mom. I'm not significant enough. And that's why today when I coach adults, a lot of the ones, even strong characters out there, a lot of the ones that avoid conflict, very often they've grown up in families where there was a lot of fighting, and in their minds they decide, you know what, it's not worth it. It breaks up the family. Don't argue. Just keep the peace. Strong personalities, but can't have difficult conversations. All right? Self-respect. Self-respect. I respect myself too much to have someone speaking to me like that. If you want to continue this conversation, please calm down and speak to me in a gentle tone and don't use that language. Right? Self-respect. Then a sense of self-worth. My worth isn't in the fact that I got 100%. My worth is that I am created in the image of God. I am special just because I am, right? And out of that sense of worth, I then perform. As opposed to I'm only worthy when I perform. I remember my middle son, keep saying my middle son, hey, a lot of stories come from Jaden. Anyway, I remember he was like, but Dad, won't you be proud of me? Won't you like me more and be impressed with me if I do well and such and such? You could see he was addicted to this thing of if I perform, and because I performed, I'm going to be loved more. But I had to show him that, you know what? I already love you to the moon and back. So performing well isn't going to get me to love you more. Make sense? Okay? Create a healthy climate. Create a healthy climate. This is crucial. Thank you so much. This is crucial. Okay? Remember that you are powerful as a parent. You're extremely powerful. And you create climate. There's nothing wrong with power. Power is A's ability to make B do something B would otherwise not have done. Powerful people have this mindset. This is who I am. This is who I want to be. And they live that out despite the environment. Guys, I'm telling you this. For the last 11 years or so, when people come to me and they say, Paul, how's life treating you? Guess what I say to them? I'm treating it well, thank you. Got married about 16 years ago. People say to me, Paul, how's married life treating you? I'm treating it well, thank you. We moved from 4 ways to Centurion in 2010. How's Centurion treating you? I'm treating it well, thank you. Because the influence and the impact I have on the world around me is bigger than it has on me. That's the mindset of powerful people. And as parents, you're extremely powerful. So what I do is when I start off my day, I could be crawling in traffic going at 5 k's an hour. I can't change the traffic, but I've already pre-decided I'm a joyful person. I'm not going to give the traffic power over my joy, right? But how do many people live? They get into that open plan at work, and what do? What mood is the boss in today? Oh, he's in a bad mood. And you spend your whole day treading on eggshells, all right? So remember that you are powerful, and you've got the power of creating climate. The mood that I'm in when I get home this afternoon is going to affect what the weekend is going to be like at home. All right? Give them your best. Prepare to go back home. Visualize what your day is going to look like. People sometimes say to me, Paul, you dealt with that situation so calmly. If someone spoke to me in that way, I would react. I'll be into them. Then you know what I want to say to them? I just pressed the replay button of a video I'd already been playing over and over again. I'd already decided, I'd visualized my day. I see myself calm. I see myself walking powerfully. I see myself cracking jokes and people are laughing. I see myself responding with curiosity when that guy is nailing me and being difficult. Okay? And when you've already done that and seen yourself and you get into that emotional state that you want to be in, it's amazing how powerful you feel and how you can actually shape your day. Say to the person next to you, I'm powerful. See, some of you are laughing because you're not comfortable with power. If I say to you, we didn't have power at home the other day, what will you say? If you're a kind, caring, reasonable human being, you'll say, oh, Paul, that was shame, sorry, you know, right? So we're fine with power when we're talking about ESCOM. But being a powerful person, what happens? We're like, oh, no, that's being arrogant. Power is basically A's ability to make B do something B would otherwise not have done. And when power is exerted, it becomes influence. You are powerful as a parent. Remain emotionally healthy because you pass on who you are. Your kids will absorb you. Use humor and laughter. We've spoken about this. Create a distinct culture. Remember I said to you, we create culture by what we teach, what we model, what we measure, what we inspect, how we react to situations, what we reward, what we punish. What you let go creates culture, doesn't it? If you don't actually discipline your kids for certain things, they'll be like, oh, so it's okay. And just remember, you've got your standards, and your standards don't have to be the same as everyone else's. Sometimes my kids will sort of say, but surely it's okay, that word is okay, Dad, to use, isn't it okay? And like, we don't use it in our household. Yeah, but I heard so-and-so's dad using it, and those other people, even that other teacher using it and so on. Yeah, but we don't do it in this household. Okay? So you want to show them that you've got your own values, and that's how you're raising them. And as long as they're under your roof, that's how they have to function. Because that's your boundaries, your space. So what culture are you creating right now? Are you creating culture by design or by default? You're always creating culture. By design or by default, you're creating culture. Okay? The other thing is you want to build trust with your kids. People buy from brands they trust. People buy from brands they have an emotional connection with. People buy from brands they like. So if your kids trust you, they're more likely to obey you. Not so? Now, there are 3 different types of trust. There's functional trust. Functional trust is I'll do what I said I'll do. So you keep your promises. If I say to my wife, I'll fetch Samuel from his play date at 3 p.m. and then I'll get some bread and milk, then I should be at home by 5. If she believes that Paul will do what he said he'll do, it means there's some degree of functional trust in the relationship. And you can measure that on a Likert scale. And each person you are relating to has a trust bank account with you. Your kids have a trust bank account with you. If you say, guys, I'll take you to the movies on Saturday, definitely, and then you don't, that's a withdrawal from your trust bank account with them. And you know what you're teaching them? You're teaching them that the world is a dangerous place, you can't trust anyone, and they become very cautious. And they think it's part of their personality, but it's something that was formed even as they were growing up because of the experience of the parent. Because remember, their image of what the world out there is like is based on what mom and dad is like. Okay? Right? So that's functional trust. The second type of trust is relational trust. What is relational trust? Relational trust is I feel safe with you. I can share with you stuff without feeling judged by you. I would rather my kids share with me stuff, even naughty stuff they've done and so on, without feeling like I'm going to react immediately. Why? Because if I react too quickly and it triggers me, guess what will happen? They'll still do the stuff and so on, but I just won't know. At this age, with the tweens, you want to know. Okay? So we need to be gracious. Some things have consequences, yes, but we need to be gracious with them. And then capability trust. Capability trust is, I believe you're capable and competent. That's why very often it's like with our 12-year-old, you'll say, guys, stop babying me. Guys, stop treating me like I'm still a baby. I can do that. I can do it on my own. That's what they're looking for. They want to know, does dad, does mom trust my capability? All right? The next is establish healthy boundaries. This is so important. You know what? When you set boundaries, it's not to control the other person's behavior, but it's to protect what's yours. And there are different types of boundaries. And this is crucial. It's crucial even with kids. There are space boundaries. Beginning of last year when my wife got her new car, she said, kids, no eating in this car. It's her space. I know some of you are laughing because you're like, Paul, how long did that last? All right? A space boundary is, guys, no smoking in this lounge. And if you want to smoke, go outside and watch what direction the wind is blowing. It's your space. And as a parent, it's important. Sometimes we've had to say to our kids, guys, this is not your lounge. What's all this video games? Take that to your room. Take this away. Take that away. This is not for homework. I had to realize that this is primarily my space, me and my wife. It's our space. But they were now literally taking over the main lounge. You know what I'm talking about. Okay, so that's important. What ambience do you want in your household? Today when I dropped them off at school, at a certain point I said, guys, just please keep quiet. Because they were having this debate about, is America better than South Africa? And my youngest son was like, guys, that's racist. Are you saying America is less corrupt than South Africa just because South Africa's got more black people? That's racist, and so on. Now you have to understand the context, you know, because my kids are mixed also, hey? They're mixed. So Samuel came out with like blonde hair, olive skin, green eyes. Jaden came out with curly hair like mine, but it's blondish, and blue eyes. And blue is a recessive gene, so there must be some mixture somewhere there. You know, a lot of people who think they're black. There's actually a bit of mixture. Anyway, and then Daniel came out. He's brown everything. You know, he looks sort of Samoan or something, right? So they're like, it's racist, and they're having this argument. I'm thinking to myself, do I want to spend the 12 minutes that I'm taking them to school driving? This is my space. Last time I checked, this is my vehicle, and they're in my vehicle, and they're doing this. I just said, guys, just keep quiet. Sometimes I'll say to them, guys, we're just going to have a competition. Who can be the quietest for the longest, the next 15 minutes? You have to know what your space is, because after all, I've seen it with my wife. She'll start off like the day, she's very sweet, very warm, and I'm like, and we're chatting over the phone while I'm doing what she's doing what she's doing. Then after she's fetched the kids, you know, sort of like, if I see her like about 4:30, somewhere there, I can see, I'm like, my love, I can see you're frazzled now. You're frazzled, okay? So sometimes we have to have space boundaries, right? Another type of boundary is setting limits. If you've got a spouse who likes to entertain all the time, it's where you can say, guys, it's been real. I'm going to bed now. I've got an early start tomorrow morning. It's a limit. When my kids are playing soccer with me, sometimes they'll say, yeah, one more game, next to five. I'm like, there's a limit. I need to also rest, okay? Maximum and minimum boundaries. This is to do with exercise. Sometimes you can say this is the minimum amount of exercise I'm going to do each week. This is the maximum. You can apply this to parenting. Moral boundaries. This is crucial, isn't it? How do you relate to someone of the opposite sex? Okay, what are your boundaries with them, right? You make decisions. I won't pay bribes. I won't lie. I won't cheat. And you've pre-decided that those are your values. And what you can do with your kids, especially in the tween years, you get them to pre-decide. So you're watching a movie together and you say, would you guys ever do what those boys there are doing? Why won't you do it? So you don't leave them to wait for the situation. You get them to decide what their moral boundaries are. All right? Self-respect boundaries. I won't stay in an environment where people speak to me like that. Health boundaries. What determines food and drink intake? Sometimes I'm coaching at one of the main banks and I'm sitting there and there are these cookies that are there like all day and I'm there like 3 days in that particular week. I have to have a boundary that I've decided beforehand, how many cookies am I going to eat? If I don't have a boundary, I'll just consume all of them, right? I do a lot of lecturing at Gibbs. The lunches are very nice there. So what do I do when I'm there? I made a decision that I won't have dessert there if I'm also going to have dessert in the evening, so that I'm not having double dessert. Does that make sense? Okay? You can also do that for your kids and give them boundaries. They feel more secure with that. Then there are body boundaries. What's private? What can people see? And at that age, you have to then coach them. What's appropriate in terms of dress? Okay? There's information boundaries. Sometimes I'm having a chat with my wife and I'll be saying to her, hey, you know, there's this good deal. This is how much they're going to pay me. This is how it's going to work out and so on. And then one of the kids comes and says, how much? What will they pay you? What? And kids talk, don't they? Kids talk. And we have to be careful, like, oh, what do we say, especially around income and those things? Because a rumor will spread very quickly. Like, hey, do you know what? Do you know how much Jaden's dad gets paid? Yeah. And I know this because they've told me things that their friends have said. And I'm like, no lawyer gets paid that amount, guys. The guy was conning you. He was confused. He put an extra 0. Okay? Then you have task and energy boundaries, okay? When is it time to stop? What is draining you and how is it impacting others? How many hours a week can you actually work? Especially those of you who absorb stress. You see, some people explode, other people implode. And those of you who implode, just remember, whatever you resist will persist. It will leak out in other ways, okay? So often I'll remain calm on the outside, even if I'm in a stressful situation. Then I'm not fully aware of what my body is going through. Then afterwards I feel like, oh, I think I could just actually collapse. But we have to be aware of our bodies, right, as parents. Then there are responsibility boundaries. How much of their homework can you help them with? Recently, one of my kids got a task to do a particular project, and the teachers actually said, you know what, help them to prepare the materials, but just remember, the project is going to be done in class, where they're building this particular thing, rocket or something. And sometimes we go through that as parents, where we start feeling like, I can see that this stuff that has been done by the other kids, definitely there was lots of parental input here. And then you feel a bit like, am I not helping my kids enough? But there's a boundary. I would rather my child gets a lower mark, but in the long term, he's learned how to do it. Why are we sending them to school? But if you're a competitive parent, everything, oh, they must do this, they must do this. Just be careful about getting caught up in that game, all right? Choice boundaries. When your kids are 11, 12, 13, around there, what can they choose for themselves and what do you choose for them? I gave you the example of our eldest son around swimming. And he was saying, you're forcing me to do sport I don't want. What can you suggest to them based on your experience and what do they need to choose on their own? One of the things I've found is people support that which they create. So when they choose for themselves certain things, they tend to then be taking ownership of it. I would have rather my kids done Zulu as a first additional language and so on, to be honest with you, but they've chosen Afrikaans. They chose and we'll support them. Now remember, we're from Zim originally. I've lived here many years, but we're from Zim originally. So now when they're doing Afrikaans and so on, speeches at home and stuff, sometimes it's like, cool, sounds great. But we don't fully understand. So now we have to get someone to tutor them extra. And it was a sad moment when my boy said to me, he said he wanted to be in the top 10 in his grade, and he didn't make it, but still got a distinction, my 12-year-old. And it was a sad moment when he said, yeah, but Dad, it's fine just getting a distinction anyway. I'm going to stop aiming for the top 10, because my Afrikaans will always bring my average down anyway. You know what I mean? All right? But it's a choice. And I can say to him, this is what you've chosen, so we're going to give you the extra support you want, and you'll use it. Your Afrikaans will help you, especially when you go, they've got Irish passports also. When you go to Europe and so on, because it's a Germanic language, it'll help you with some of the languages there. All right? Time boundaries. This is very important. What is the maximum amount of time you'll spend at a function? or watching TV or socializing. People say to me, Paul, how do you do all the stuff you do? You pastor churches, you coach people, you're doing this marriage show on TV at the moment. How do you do all the stuff you do? It's to do with use of time. We've all been given 24 hours in a day. The difference between us is how we use it. Okay? So I see people at these family gatherings with the extended family having small talk for 3 or 4 hours. And there's always this one person who plucks up the courage, enough courage, and they always have to have an excuse. Have you noticed that? And they'll say, sorry guys, I need to fetch my son from a play date. And then what does everyone else say? Oh, I think I'm parking you in. Okay, I'm also going to go now. And I'm asking myself, at what point did all these people want to leave? Here's the principle. So I'm there writing my next book or developing something because I've already been there for an hour. I had quality time with people, real conversations. And when I leave, I don't have to have an excuse. Why? Self-esteem, self-respect. I respect myself enough to keep appointments with myself. You see, often it's easy to keep an appointment with someone else. Right? So what's your name, sir? Vusi. So I'll say, hey, sorry, I can't meet you now. I've got a meeting with Vusi. It's easy to say that. It's more difficult to say, sorry, I can't meet you. I just need some me time. Sorry, I can't meet you on Saturday morning. I'm just working on that book. I'm just reading that book that Paul recommended. That's self-respect. And successful people have strong boundaries in terms of that. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. Then there are money boundaries. What are limits to your spending? Limits to birthday presents. I'm sure you guys have strategies here. We say to our kids, guys, either you have a big party and a small present, or a big present, and when I talk big, I'm talking, a few grand, etc., and no party. But you can't be like, big party, big present, okay? Can't go to all the parties that you get invited to, especially if, that age where they're being invited to many parties. Which parties are you going to go to this year? Choose. You're complaining about that kid, now you want to go to his party, okay? So these are boundaries with our kids, and they choose what they want. Relational and social boundaries. Often my wife and I will start at the beginning of the year and we'll say, what are the relationships we need to initiate? Who do we need to build with this year? So be strategic about your relationships. Otherwise, you'll be so drained and you can't parent your kids because you're always tired. Okay? So relationships to redefine, relationships to rebuild, relationships to nurture. And for us, it translates to, so this is a list of people who we're going to be inviting for dinners because you can't be best friends with everyone. Then we've got identity boundaries that I mentioned earlier on. This is what I like. Not my dad, not my mom, not my siblings. This is what I like as mom. This is what you like as child. And there's no enmeshment. Often when I speak to certain moms, I say, you know what? They say she's called Debbie. Debbie got lost somewhere along the line. I'm going to help you to rediscover Debbie. That's an identity boundary. Okay? And here's some examples of boundary scripts. I will only continue this conversation if you engage with me respectfully. I can bring the book you left behind. This is what you say to your child. But only later when I'm driving that way. Don't fall into the trap where they keep forgetting things. You keep rescuing them. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. Let them experience the consequences of their behavior. Right? I'm tired now. We can continue later. Okay? I'm going to bed now. I have an early start tomorrow morning. That's a powerful boundary script. Often we don't set boundaries. Why? Because we don't have the words. All right? If you're not at the car by 1:30, I'll need to leave to fetch your sister. Okay? These are real life boundaries. I was coaching someone the other day, said, his kids are now at varsity, but on weekends they like to come home and so on. And he said, you know what, Paul, recently I had to put a boundary in place because we were coming home late and I had to wake up for them and open the door and that kind of thing. And I'll say to them, guys, if you're not back by 9, you can go and sleep at Res because I'm not going to keep waking up like this. And found that the following week, the guy didn't even go out. He was just relaxing at home. Okay? Okay. Teach them to fight fairly, and that's to do with conflict management. There's stages of conflict resolution. Get your kids to have an accurate diagnosis of the problem. I mentioned that at the start. And then train them to accurately express the impact the problem had. You see, often there's what's called emotion dysregulation. It's where a conversation starts and it's just about, why are you wearing navy and not sky blue? And then afterwards, after 15 minutes, it's now a fist fight. It's escalated. Because you get into a state of emotion dysregulation, you can't think clearly, and when you can't think clearly, you can't speak clearly, so you start saying things that you regret. Some people calm down quickly, other people it takes them 3 or 4 hours. It's about training your children to be able to get back to a place of accurately expressing the impact of the problem. And one of the ways you do this is just by being curious. So if someone is triggered and they're shouting and so on, just ask them questions. Just say, this seems to be really bothering you. What's really under all of this? What's really bothering you about the situation? You're getting them to shift from heart to head. From emotional reaction, where in their brain they're reacting, fight, flight, freeze, your amygdala, your emotional center, and they're lashing out, to a place where they're using the prefrontal cortex of their brain, the more logical, rational part, and they're answering your questions. That's the power of curiosity. Okay? Just ask them questions. Say, what else do you need in this situation? Can you tell me factually, what did you actually see him doing? Not what's your interpretation. Okay? Then the next stage of conflict is active engagement for a solution. Don't dwell too much on the other two without going to, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? Does that make sense? Some people, their default is they jump to the solution, but there's no accurate diagnosis of the problem. It's extremely powerful when you do this. Remember, some people are sensitive to different things. Some people are sensitive to smells. Others aren't. You'll see where I'm going with this. My wife was abroad, and she came back a couple of Tuesdays ago, and she smelled her pillow, and she's like, my pillow is smelling. Have the kids been using it? Because sometimes they take her pillows. And she said, smell. And then I smelled the pillow, and I couldn't smell anything. Okay? Then she changed the pillowcase. But some people are more sensitive to smells. Other people are more sensitive to noise. So we're here in this room. For some of you, it's fine. But some of you are like, what's that noise outside? Who's in the playground? What's going on? In the same way, in terms of emotional sensitivity, some of your kids, it's high, and others, it's low. And in that body of knowledge, emotional sensitivity, you have some people who are sensitive to words. You know those people who will actually go and they'll say, he called me this, and they look it up in the dictionary. They say, but English is his third language, and you're looking up in the dictionary. He barely understood what he was saying to you, right? Right? Some people are sensitive to words. Other people are sensitive to tone. Yeah, but you know, it was just a dig, Paul, and it was so prickly. Oh, that's a normal thing. I wouldn't have had a problem with that. Others are sensitive to body language. Others are sensitive to exclusion. So when you're speaking to your child, try to zone in on the area of sensitivity, and then you affirm them in that particular area. Does that make sense? Okay? There are different types of conflict. You can have conflict based on status. Who's in charge? So in the process of moving homes, right? Houses on the market want to be closer to where their school is. So they want to stay in the same estate as the school, right? And sometimes if they've got friends who are leaving that particular house, they'll start booking places. If we buy this friend's house, yeah, I'm booking this room and you're booking that room, right? But that conflict ends very quickly when I say to them, guys, that's not your decision to make. So if you want to understand why there's fighting in the home, very often it's because of status, who's in charge. And parents need to clarify that. The second is task or goal. I want to go to Durban. You want to go to Kimberley. There's only one vehicle and there are limited resources for fuel. So where are we going to go? Okay. The third is process. Very often when you're arguing with each other, you end up at polar opposites. This is my enemy. She's in the green corner. I'm in the blue corner. But you know what? In actual fact, it's the how that we're arguing about. Guys, we're on the same team. We're going in the same direction. But it's the how, the process. And then there's interpersonal dynamics. What do we mean by interpersonal dynamics? You were raising your voice. You spoke via and you didn't come directly to me. You started shouting, right? I didn't like it. When you can actually see where the area of conflict is, it's very much easier for you to do those 3 steps. Accurate diagnosis, accurate expression, and then solution. Does that make sense? Okay, very powerful thing. So, and that's what I explain here, all right? Key things in conflict, have household rules of engagement. Guys, whenever we're fighting, our rules of engagement, you can't walk out in a conversation unless you've agreed that we're going to press pause. You can't raise your voice. You can't slam a door. We have to resolve the thing before we go to bed at night. We've got certain rules of engagement, my wife and I. We can't bring up unrelated issues from the past. We have to talk about the issue at hand. So in your household with your kids, come up with rules of engagement in terms of conflict. Listening skills, listen with empathy, all right? When someone is speaking, don't interrupt. Curiosity, I've mentioned that. Practice dialogue, not debate. You know, with debate is 100% advocacy, where you're putting your point forward, and 0% inquiry. But dialogue is different. Dialogue is 50% advocacy, so I want you to hear my story, but 50% inquiry. I want to listen to your story. And guess what? The most powerful person in a room is the one that speaks second, not the one that speaks first. So if I first listen to you, listening to understand, not listening to reply, listening to really understand. You know that the desire to be understood is to communication what oxygen is to the lungs. But if I say, hey, Vusi, give me understanding of your world. What does the world look like from your mountaintop? And then you say, Paul, what does the world look like from your mountaintop? And we're listening to each other. Then we solve the crisis. We solve the problem. And we can train up our kids to do these particular things. Beware of miscommunication styles in conflict. Identify what they are. You have the avoider, right? You have the gunny sacker. What's the gunny sacker? They'll just store up injustices, and then one day they pull them out as ammo. That's actually one of the reasons why resentment happens. What's to resent? It's to feel again. It's like I'm just storing it up so that I can punish the person later on with this if they bring up an issue with me. That's the gunny sacker. Make sure you don't do that. There's the kitchen sink fighter. They'll bring everything and anything. Yeah, but at New Year's last year you did this, then you did this and so on, and not the issue at hand. Healthy conflict in a family or in a team setting at work, guys, is where we say, what's the issue? Let's not bring up other things. Then you have the trapper. You know what the trapper does? It's like, yeah, but you said that the person who's more organized must organize the holiday, didn't you? Yeah, no, but you can also help out. No, but did you say the more organized one must? Yeah, okay, who's more organized, me or you? No, answer the question, me or you? Me. So you organize it. Okay, that's the trapper. Then you have the joker. They don't like conflict, so they'll joke about everything. Then you have the trivial tyrannizer. Instead of raising up the issue, what do? They know what annoys you. They know what bugs you. So they'll switch they'll put the volume up because they know it annoys you. And they use all sorts of tactics to irritate you. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, they've got an issue. Then you've got the sniper. The sniper will wait for the public forum. And then they'll bring up a particular thing to embarrass you. Do you know what you do with snipers? With snipers, just agree with them, because often they're telling the truth, but they want to see you embarrassed. So don't act embarrassed. Just say, thank you for raising that. You know, I'm also really concerned about that particular issue. All right? Then you've got the tank. They speak over you. They interrupt you. And it's important to have rules of engagement around that. Say, let me finish. I'm so proud of my youngest son, Daniel, because he's been saying that, because his two older brothers are strong personalities, and he's been standing up for himself like, let me finish. And then he carries on, right? Then you've got the mind reader. That's supposed to be mind. You've got the mind reader, okay? And that's an interesting one. They think they figured you out in terms of like, you know what, I think you actually feel insecure about this and this and this, and that's why, and that was your motive for doing X, Y, Z. You're like, how can you read my mind? These are miscommunication styles. You've got the screaming Mimi, who shouts and screams at everyone. Be careful if your child still has temper tantrums, because you just teach, if you entertain it, you're teaching them how to manipulate when they grow up. You've got the guilt maker. No, it's fine, it's okay. I'm the one who has to be everyone's taxi driver anyway. I'm now, it's now, we've got our personal Uber service, type of thing, okay? Then there's the subject changer. You want to address the issue, but they keep changing the subject. Bring them back in, okay? Then we've got the belt liner. They always shoot beneath the belt. You know what I mean by that, right? They'll say that thing that just floors you. And we see our kids doing it, from a young age. And if it works when they're young, they'll use it when they grow up. So you want to nip it in the bud. My kids know the other person's area of weakness, and it's like, they'll use it. It's like, and the other one is now like, Mom, he said this. All right? Then there's the withholder. What does the withholder do? The withholder will then withdraw emotionally, and they punish you based on that. They'll give you the silent treatment instead of actually engaging with you. All right? And then as I draw towards the close, you want to create a culture of feedback. Teach your children how to give feedback and not make judgments. So for example, if there's a drama rehearsal and the guy is pitching up late, instead of saying, I don't think you're committed anymore, that's a judgment. You don't seem to be that committed, that's not feedback. How do you give them feedback using SBI? Hey, do you remember at the last AGM, we made a decision that we're shifting rehearsal time from 4 p.m. to 3 p.m. Do you remember that? Yes, I remember. In fact, it was your idea, wasn't it? Yes, I remember. Okay, so that situation, behavior. I've observed that in the last 3 rehearsals, you've come through after 3:30. Now, if there was CCTV camera, it will spot the guy coming in 3:35, 3:32, 3:45. It's not a judgment. You're stating the behavior. And for it to be a behavior, can it be recorded by a camera? Impact. Impact number 1. It's impacted me really greatly because I feel nervous and stressed out at the start of the session. I'm also concerned that the younger actors and actresses might follow suit and also start pitching up late. I'm also concerned about your personal brand with everyone else concerning this particular thing. And guys, if you can use this for both positive and negative situations in your household, extremely powerful. You can use SBI even when we're talking about positive things. So instead of just saying, great presentation or great game, you say to them, situation. Hey, remember when we went and we were watching you playing soccer the other day? Yes, yes, yes. Behavior. I saw that you continued pushing and supporting your other people and passing to them a lot. Impact. It showed me that it's not just all about you, but you now understand what teamwork is like. Do you know what? They will replicate that behavior. Instead of saying, great job, okay? And then you end off by showing them how to improve on the particular thing. Hey, keep up the good work. Or if it's negative feedback, hey, from now onwards, can you come to the drama rehearsal at maybe about 10 minutes to, so that we can do a dry run together. So that's how you would use that. Teach them also how to apologize. Some of you, if you've watched our TV show, you would see this thing called okay? Apology is not just saying sorry. Apology is admission of guilt. That's the A. The I is impact of behavior on the other person. So you acknowledge that this affected you badly. The first R is a sense of remorse. That's where you say, I'm sorry. Then it's restitution. I've taught my kids about restitution. So it's not just sorry, but what are you going to do to make up for it? And then reconciliation. Hey, please can you forgive me for this? And then you end off with a request. Please be patient with me. I'm a work in progress. Okay? And then finally, we exercise loving discipline. Loving discipline. Maintain a good emotional bond with your kids. Okay? And we've spoken about that a lot. Be consistent about how you discipline, not flying off the handle one day and then next day you just let them do whatever they want to do. They end up confused. I've had to sometimes apologize to my kids where I'm not consistent in how I discipline them. Avoid these extremes, okay? Try to be consistent about what's allowed at home. Try to be consistent about what's allowed at home and outside. Otherwise, if you let things go at home, you see them doing embarrassing things when they're outside, jumping on people's sofas and so on, okay? Make sure you've got clearly set out boundaries and standards. That's so important. You can't discipline a child on something that hasn't been clearly stated to them, okay? So, chores, homework, work versus playtime. This is a biggie, you know, where I say to my kids, you can only play outside and so on after you've done some work. Money, manners, cleanliness. So you've got standards around all those things, okay? Make sure that you and your child are clear about the consequences of non-compliance. That if you don't comply, it's not just dad will be upset, mom will be upset. If you don't comply, these are the consequences. We all know what it's like at work when we're not clear about the consequences. All of a sudden, someone is suspended, and they just thought it would be a warning, okay? Try to catch them doing something right and then celebrate it. And I mentioned this to you earlier on. Give feedback on positives and not just negatives. The method of discipline must be uncomfortable for the child. If you've got an introvert, there's no point in just saying to the child, listen, go for a time out. Spend time. You know, I'm grounding you. But the person doesn't have many friends out there. Okay? All right? Discipline is supposed to be painful. All right? Discipline them in a manner that suits their personality and also their age. It must be age appropriate. And when you get into those tween years, discipline changes, doesn't it? Okay? Sometimes it's about reward system. Sometimes it's withdrawing certain privileges that are important to them. Okay? You might focus on chores. You might focus on financial consequences for something being broken or lost. Okay? You might have behavior contracts where you say to a child, listen, you know what? In order for you to end up having a smartphone, you first need to show us that for the next few months you're disciplined in terms of how you use your iPad. Okay? That kind of thing. Another thing at this age is natural consequences. So for example, I said to my kids the other night, my 12-year-old, he had a friend over, they had a sleepover, right, on a Friday. But they had soccer the following day. But they wanted to stay up late. Now I had to pick my battle. Am I going to force him to go to bed at a certain time? Or am I going to say to him, you will experience the natural consequences of staying up late? Following morning, of course, he's tired. He's finished. So tired. So he learned very quickly that, you know what, I need to go to bed early if I'm going to survive the next day. And even though his bedtime is later than his brother's, very often he's the one, 7:15, he's like, going to bed, guys, going to bed, before his brothers. Because he's now at that age where he understands that. Does that make sense? Instead of this fight about, you haven't gone to sleep, close your eyes, he'll go to bed and he'll be just lying awake. Okay? Okay, so the discipline must also be appropriate for the level of misdemeanor. You can't have an extreme punishment for something small, or a small punishment for something extreme. Sometimes we look at the consequences like, you broke my vase, but it was a mistake, and now he's got a severe punishment, okay? Just because it broke, but it was a mistake. Avoid shaming your children. Reaffirm your affection and love. Not easy when you feel personally hurt by their behavior, right? Teach proactively rather than reactively. So you say to them, what would be right to do in this scenario? Okay? Will you ever do what these boys did? Why not? Okay? So help them to pre-decide their behavior. And just remember, even with younger kids, those of you with younger kids, there's a difference between a bribe and a reward. A bribe is rewarding the wrong behavior. A reward rewards the right behavior. So for example, if you've got a young kid who has temper tantrums at the shops, if they're now having a tantrum and then you give them a chocolate to keep them quiet, you've just rewarded the wrong behavior. But if before you go to the mall, you say, guys, rules of engagement, decide up front what you want, no temper tantrums or anything. If you behave yourselves well, we will pass through McDonald's and I'll get you a McFizz each. That's a reward. Can you see? You're rewarding the right behavior. So that's very important. No means no. If you keep changing your tune, they won't take you seriously. Only give a consequence you're willing to enforce. Otherwise, it'll just be like you're threatening them. Okay? Work as a team with your spouse. Make sure you're in agreement. Work as a team, especially when disciplining is stressful for you. So my wife will often say, my love, I need your help here. Can you come and take over? Because in the past, I'll be thinking she's doing a great job. Then she'll say, but you didn't help me with the boys when they were fighting. So it's stressful for her. I'll step in. It's not stressful for me. Tune in daily to your kids emotionally. Touch base with them with regards to their physical and emotional needs. Boys need to learn to articulate their emotions. We've spoken about this. Encourage open communication and expression of emotions. Right? Enlarge their vocab. All right? And you can do this using the emotional wheel. All right? Which is this one. It's got all sorts of emotions on it. You can get this. You can even Google it if you want. And then you ask them questions. How are you feeling? Are you feeling helpless? Are you feeling belittled? Are you feeling angry, happy? A lot of people, because we grow up in a non-reflexive society where we don't use emotional words, a lot of people struggle with this. What triggers are causing these emotions? You're saying you felt hurt. What triggered it? Right? It helps their EQ, doesn't it? What's the impact of how you're feeling on yourself right now? What about on others? What lies have you believed that are causing you to feel this way? What are the counter arguments? What else could be true? Right? What's the current your emotional impact on others right now? If you continue feeling this way, what are the possible consequences? What choices do you have? What are the positive emotions that you can condition yourself to experience today? And you get them to condition themselves positively. We spoke about empathy. Remember that? And that's parenting for the 21st century. Thank you so much. I know we've gone over, but it's been great having you here.